In April 2026, the Middle East ignited. A joint U.S.-Israeli preemptive strike, codenamed Operation Epic Fury, was intended to quickly neutralize Iranian military infrastructure. Instead, it triggered a sprawling, multi-theater asymmetric war that immediately overwhelmed coalition expectations. This map shows the Strait of Hormuz. When the conflict escalated, Iranian forces deployed thousands of naval sea mines across this narrow, 21-mile-wide choke point. By trapping 20% of the world's crude oil, commercial shipping traffic plummeted by 94%. Ordinarily, crises in the Gulf are mediated by wealthy, neutral states like Qatar and Oman, but their neutrality was instantly compromised when their own energy infrastructures were struck by ballistic missiles caught in the crossfire. Global energy markets panicked. With benchmark oil prices surging past $110 a barrel and the world economy hurtling towards severe stagflation, a massive diplomatic vacuum opened up. The global system desperately needed a middleman. The unexpected answer came from Islamabad, Pakistan. But Pakistan was not acting from a position of comfortable stability. The global energy shocks severed their supply chains, causing a brutal 66% surge in domestic fuel costs. The price of petrol rocketed to an unsustainable 458 rupees per liter, driving the nation's economy toward collapse. The economic pain collided with visceral, deadly anti-American protests following the outbreak of the war. Demonstrators attempting to storm the U.S. consulate in Karachi were fired upon, resulting in multiple civilian deaths and requiring massive security cordons across the country. As if hyperinflation and riots were not enough, local health authorities in Lahore were simultaneously battling an outbreak of a highly infectious, exceptionally dangerous type 1 wild poliovirus. Yet, just miles away, inside the heavily fortified red zone of the capital, intense preparations were underway at the Serena Hotel to host U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and a 70-person Iranian delegation. A state facing severe structural vulnerabilities, violent domestic unrest, and a public health emergency had positioned itself as the sole geopolitical actor capable of placing two warring superpowers at the same negotiating table. Pakistan's peacemaking effort was driven by strict national survival. Their textile industry, which makes up over 60% of their exports, relies entirely on imported fuel. Furthermore, a prolonged Gulf blockade directly threatened the billions of dollars in remittances sent home by Pakistani expatriates working in the Middle East. To execute this diplomatic maneuver, Islamabad utilized a highly unified hybrid power structure. Both the civilian government and the powerful military establishment worked together to pull different geopolitical levers at the exact same time. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif opened the Western Channel. He utilized his long-standing political relationships and reported personal business ties with U.S. President Donald Trump to directly engage the White House. Simultaneously, the Pakistani military leadership stepped in. Chief of Army Staff Field Marshal Asim Munir leaned on his extensive, direct strategic lines of communication with Washington's top military brass. This synchronized pressure from both civilian and military leaders achieved a breakthrough. President Trump publicly acknowledged their influence, agreeing to pause the bombing campaigns and establish a fragile 14-day ceasefire. Turning to the east, Field Marshal Munir activated his deep military-to-military contacts with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. In a climate of extreme paranoia, these back channels were vital to assure Tehran that the negotiating grounds would be secure and impartial. The Iranian delegation was led by Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Because of severe distrust, Ghalibaf and his 70-member team only agreed to attend after receiving personal security guarantees directly from Pakistan's military leadership. The meetings were structured as proximity talks. Because the warring delegations refused to sit at the same table, they were placed in separate, heavily secured rooms inside the Serena Hotel. Pakistani diplomats physically ran proposals back and forth down the hotel corridors. This exhausting shuttle diplomacy stretched into a grueling 21-hour marathon session lasting overnight. This graphic outlines the collision of demands. On the left, the United States presented a 15-point proposal. Vice President Vance demanded an affirmative, binding commitment that Iran would permanently dismantle all of its nuclear enrichment tools. On the right, the Iranian delegation countered with a hardened 10-point plan. Tehran maintained they possessed absolute sovereign rights to nuclear knowledge and demanded the power to levy a $2 million transit fee on every commercial ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Pakistan's execution of the logistics was flawless. However, the ideological chasm separating Washington and Tehran was simply too vast to be bridged over a single weekend. By Sunday morning, the talks officially collapsed. Vice President Vance emerged to announce that the American delegation was leaving Islamabad without a long-term agreement. The negotiations foundered on strict red lines. The United States refused to halt Israeli operations against Hezbollah and Lebanon, and Iran flatly refused to negotiate away its nuclear scientific knowledge under military coercion. Yet a hidden victory emerged from the failure. The sheer logistical effort required to orchestrate this summit successfully bought the world a 14-day ceasefire. That 2-week pause stopped the bleeding of global energy markets and prevented an immediate economic freefall. When asymmetric adversaries bypass conventional militaries to weaponize global supply chains, the resulting economic shockwaves force vulnerable, desperate regional actors to step up as the world's primary diplomats. The Islamabad Summit may have collapsed without a signature, but right now, Pakistan's fragile, quiet back channel remains the only safety net keeping the Middle East from returning to total, unrestricted war.